My son sued me, trying to take my $18 million estate and the custody of my grandchildren. "You'll never see the kids again, you crazy old fool," he sneered right there in front of the judge. Completely devastated, I retreated to the secluded mountain property my late husband Eli owned. As I was cleaning, I found a safe hidden behind the vintage stove. The combination was my date of birth. Inside, there was a letter that began, "If you are reading this, the moment of truth has arrived." But let me tell you from the beginning how I got to that moment, the moment that changed everything forever. My name is Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 67 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I truly believed I had a family who loved me. My husband, Elijah, died 2 years ago of a heart attack, leaving me a sprawling $18 million estate in Buckhead, Atlanta, and several thriving businesses. I thought my son, Brandon, a 42-year-old successful attorney, would be my anchor in my senior years. How terribly wrong I was. It all started when Brandon came home with his wife, Tiffany, and the 8-year-old twins, Ethan and Zoe. I was blissfully happy living with my grandchildren. I watched them when their parents were working, I cooked their favorite meals, and I took them to the park. "Mom, we need to talk," Brandon said that October afternoon, with a seriousness that chilled me to the bone. Tiffany stood beside him, wearing a red dress I always thought was too provocative, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "What is it, son? Is something wrong?" I asked, pouring coffee in my favorite living room, the one where Eli and I spent so many evenings talking about our dreams. "We've been watching you, Mom. Lately you've been acting very strange. You forget things, you repeat conversations, you leave the stove burner on." I froze. It was true that sometimes I forgot where I left my keys or repeated a story, but that happens to anyone my age. It didn't mean I was crazy. "Brandon, those are just normal small memory slips. Your father had them at my age too," I replied, trying to stay calm. But Tiffany leaned forward, those calculating eyes that always made me nervous, fixed on me. "Eleanor, yesterday you gave the children ice cream for breakfast. The day before, you forgot to pick them up from the North Atlanta Academy. The principal had to call us." That wasn't true. I would never forget my grandchildren. But before I could defend myself, Brandon dropped the bomb that would shatter my world. "Mom, we've consulted with several doctors. We believe you're showing early signs of Alzheimer's disease. This house is too big for you, and the children, well, they can't be put in danger." The words hit me like daggers. Alzheimer's, danger. What was my own son talking about? "I don't understand, Brandon. I feel perfectly fine. I've cared for the children since they were born. I would never hurt them." Tiffany and Brandon exchanged a look that broke my heart. It was the look of two people who had already made a decision without consulting me. "That's why we've decided the best thing is for you to move into a high-end assisted living facility," Brandon continued. "We'll sell the house to pay for your care, and the kids will stay with us permanently." My world collapsed. My home, the one Eli and I built with so much love, the one that held 40 years of memories. They wanted to sell it and take Ethan and Zoe away forever. "No, Brandon, this is my house, and those are my grandchildren too. I'm not going anywhere." But my son was no longer the loving child I raised. His eyes hardened in a way that scared me. "Mom, you can cooperate, or we can do this the legal way. You decide." That threat was the beginning of the end. In the following weeks, Brandon hired doctors who confirmed his false diagnosis. He presented testimonies from neighbors who allegedly saw me behaving strangely, and he took everything from me. The day of the court hearing was the most humiliating of my life. Sitting in that cold room, listening to my own son describe me as a feeble-minded, dangerous, elderly woman, I felt my heart tear into pieces. The trial came like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I sat in the cold courtroom, watching my own son destroy my reputation word by word. Brandon was dressed in his best black suit, the one I bought him for his birthday last year. The irony. Tiffany was in the gallery wearing a shimmering gold dress that glistened under the fluorescent lights as if it were a celebration instead of my living funeral. "Your Honor," Brandon began, with that professional voice I used to be so proud of. "My mother, Eleanor Hayes, shows clear signs of advanced cognitive decline. She can no longer live alone in that $18 million mansion without representing a danger to herself and my children." Tears streamed down my cheeks. How could he say those things about me? Me, who raised him alone after Eli worked 18 hours a day to build our empire. Me, who stayed up all night caring for him when he had a fever, who sold my own jewelry to pay for his law school tuition. I present to this court the testimony of Dr. Silas Thorne, a specialist neurologist, who evaluated my mother last week. An older man stood up on the witness stand. I didn't even know him, but there he was, deciding my future with words I never thought I'd hear about myself. "After an exhaustive evaluation," the doctor said in a monotone voice, "Mrs. Hayes presents symptoms consistent with early-stage senile dementia. Frequent forgetfulness, temporal disorientation, and episodes of confusion that could jeopardize her safety and that of minors under her care." "That is a lie," I shouted, standing up from my seat. "I have never been with that doctor in my life." The judge banged his gavel. "Ma'am, maintain your composure or I will have to ask you to leave the courtroom." My attorney, a young, inexperienced man who barely cost me $5,000 because Brandon had frozen all my accounts, gently took my arm. "Mrs. Hayes, please sit down. This doesn't help." But how could I stay calm when I was hearing lie after lie? Brandon continued presenting evidence of my supposed dementia, testimonies from neighbors who claimed to have seen me talking to myself in the garden. The truth was, I was talking to Eli, visiting his memorial mentally while watering the roses he loved so much. "Your Honor," Brandon pulled out a thick folder, "I also present photographs of my mother's home. As you can see, there are clear signs of negligence and disorder that confirm her inability to maintain a safe household." The photographs were passed from hand to hand. I recognized my kitchen, but it looked dirty, messy, as if someone had deliberately ransacked it. My living room was stacked with old newspapers. My bedroom had clothes thrown everywhere. "Those photos are manipulated," I whispered to my lawyer. "My house never looks like that." But no one was listening. Brandon had orchestrated everything perfectly. Then came the worst part. Brandon approached the stand, and with fake tears in his eyes that turned my stomach, he began his final act. "Your Honor, it deeply pains me to be here today. I love my mother, but my children, Ethan and Zoe, deserve to grow up in a safe environment. Last month, my mother forgot to pick them up from school. They were found alone at 7 o'clock at night, crying because they thought we had abandoned them." "Liar!" I shouted again. "I would never do that to my grandchildren." But Brandon continued his performance. "Last week, she gave them adult medications, believing they were vitamins. We had to rush them to the hospital to have their stomachs pumped." Every word was like a knife in my chest. My own son was inventing terrible stories about me to seize my inheritance. Tiffany also testified with that sweet false voice she used at family gatherings. Eleanor was always a wonderful mother-in-law, but lately, she's very changed. Yesterday, she asked me the same question 5 times. The day before, she didn't recognize the children for a moment. It is very sad to see her like this. Lies. All lies. But the judge believed them. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he nodded as he listened to every fabricated testimony. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up with all the dignity I had left. "Your Honor, I raised that man sitting right there. I worked alongside my husband for 40 years to build everything we have. I have never put my grandchildren in danger. I love them more than my own life." My voice broke as I saw Ethan and Zoe's little faces in the gallery, not understanding why their grandma was crying in this strange place full of serious people. Brandon was my pride. I sent him to the best university. I paid for his law degree. I supported him when he started his firm. And this is how he repays me. By inventing illnesses, I don't have to take away what my husband and I built with so much sacrifice. But my words sounded like the ravings of a desperate elderly woman. Brandon had planted the seed of doubt, and now everything I said seemed to confirm his version of events. The judge deliberated for barely 20 minutes. 20 minutes to destroy an entire life. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he said with a solemn voice, "This court determines that Mrs. Eleanor Hayes is not in a condition to administer her assets or maintain custody of minors." The gavel fell like lightning. Legal guardianship and asset administration are granted to Mr. Brandon Hayes, and the permanent custody of the minors, Ethan and Zoe, is placed under his responsibility. The world stopped. Brandon stood up triumphant, embracing Tiffany as if they had won the lottery, because that was exactly what they had done. They had won $18 million with lies. I approached my grandchildren before they took them away from me forever. "Grandma loves you so much," I whispered, hugging them desperately. But Brandon abruptly pulled me away. "Get away from my children. You've done enough damage." And then came the phrase that would haunt my nightmares. "You'll never see the kids again, you crazy old fool," he said, laughing, just low enough for only me to hear, but with a cruelty I will never forget. I left that courthouse completely destroyed, without a home, without my grandchildren, without family, without anything. I walked out of that courthouse like a ghost. My legs trembled so much I could barely walk. People looked at me with pity as I dragged my feet down the cold corridors that had witnessed my public humiliation. Brandon and Tiffany came out behind me. He had a look of satisfaction that turned my stomach. She was carrying Zoe in her arms while Ethan walked hand in hand with his father. My grandchildren, the babies I helped raise, who knew my lullabies by heart, who ran into my arms every time they saw me. "Bye, Grandma!" Ethan shouted, trying to wriggle free from Brandon's hand to run toward me, but his father held him firmly. "She's not your grandma anymore, son. Remember what we told you. The lady is very sick and can't take care of you anymore." Tears completely blinded me. "Brandon, please, they are my grandchildren too. Don't do this to me." But he kept walking as if I were invisible. Tiffany gave me one last look, and for a second I saw something in her eyes that chilled my blood. It wasn't sadness or compassion, it was pure triumph, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years. My lawyer approached me with a look of defeat. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hayes. We did what we could, but the evidence against you was overwhelming." Evidence. It was all a lie. Brandon invented every word. "I know, but legally, we couldn't prove it. Brandon is a very skilled attorney. He prepared this case for months, maybe years." Those words hit me like a hammer. Years. It meant my son had been planning to rob me much longer than I imagined. The next few days were hell. I had 1 week to move my things out of the mansion that had been my home for 40 years. 1 week to pack an entire life into boxes. Brandon didn't speak a word to me throughout the process. He hired a moving company to pack my belongings as if I were a stranger. I walked through those memory-filled hallways, touching the walls where Eli and I had hung pictures of our family, where we had marked Brandon's height when he was a child. "Ma'am," the moving supervisor asked me, "what should we do with this antique furniture in the basement?" I went down to see what he was talking about. In a dusty corner were the first pieces of furniture Eli and I bought when we were newlyweds. A wooden table he repaired with his own hands. Chairs we painted yellow together one Sunday afternoon. "Leave them," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't have room for memories anymore." But Brandon appeared behind me with that coldness that was now so familiar. "Take everything. I don't want anything of hers in my house." His house was my house, the house Eli and I built brick by brick. The house where he was born, where he took his first steps, where we celebrated every one of his birthdays. "Brandon, please, just let me keep some photos of you when you were little, some memories of your father." He looked at me as if I were an annoying insect. "I already told you I don't want anything of yours here. This house needs a deep cleaning after years of negligence." Negligence. I had kept that house immaculate for decades. Every corner shone, every garden was perfectly maintained. But now Brandon was describing it as if it had been a dump. Tiffany appeared on the basement stairs, wearing tight jeans and a pink blouse that looked too young for her 35 years. "Honey, The decorators are here. They want to start the main living room remodel, okay? Remodel. Not even 3 days had passed since they got the house, and they already wanted to erase every trace of my existence. Wait, I begged them. At least let me say goodbye to the grandchildren. I haven't been able to explain what's happening. Brandon laughed with a cruelty I had never known him to possess. Explain what? That their grandma is crazy? We already explained it to them. The children understand that you need specialized medical help. I'm not crazy, and you know it perfectly well. The doctors say otherwise, Mom. Now please, finish packing and go. The children get scared when you get hysterical. Hysterical. That word hurt me more than all the lies in the trial. I, who was always a calm, thoughtful woman, who solved every family problem with patience and love, now I was hysterical for defending my home and my grandchildren. That night, I slept in a cheap hotel near the airport. I had nowhere to go. Brandon had frozen all my accounts for my own good, according to the judge. I only had the cash I kept in my wallet for emergencies. I sat on that hard, cold bed, surrounded by boxes with the few personal items I could salvage, and I cried like I hadn't cried since Eli's death. But these weren't tears of grief for a natural loss. They were tears of betrayal, disbelief, and a wound I knew would never fully heal. The next day, I remembered the Blue Ridge Mountain retreat. Eli had bought that property 20 years ago when we dreamed of retiring to the country. It was about 2 hours from the city on 12 acres of land surrounded by mountains. We had gone only a few times because we were always busy with business, but Eli kept it because he said someday it would be our refuge. Maybe Brandon doesn't know it exists, I thought, with a glimmer of hope. I hired a taxi that cost me $200, money I couldn't afford to spend, but I had no other option. The driver looked at me curiously as he loaded my boxes into the car. "Moving to the country, ma'am?" "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to explain my tragedy to a stranger. The drive was silent. I looked out the window as the city moved away, taking with it everything that had been my life until that moment. The skyscrapers gave way to small houses, then open fields, and finally, the mountains surrounding Eli's property. When we arrived, my heart sank. The place looked abandoned, as if no one had set foot there in years. The main house was small compared to the mansion, but it had a rustic charm Eli adored. The wooden walls were faded, the windows were fogged, and the yard was completely overgrown with weeds. "Are you sure you want to stay here, ma'am?" the driver asked, seeing my face of discouragement. "Yes, I'll be fine here," I lied, paying him and watching him drive away down the dusty trail. I was left alone in that absolute solitude. The silence was deafening after so many years of living in the city. The only sounds were the wind in the trees and the distant chirping of birds. I opened the front door with the key Eli kept under a broken flower pot. The interior smelled of dampness and neglect. Furniture covered with white sheets looked like ghosts in the gloom. Everything was covered in a layer of dust so thick that my steps left footprints on the floor. The first night was terrible. There was no electricity. Brown water came out of the pipes, and every sound startled me. I lay on an old mattress I found in the main bedroom, hugging the only photo I managed to save of Eli and me on our wedding day. What would he have done in my place, I wondered, feeling his absence like physical pain. I spent the following days cleaning. It was the only thing I could do to keep from truly going crazy with all the thoughts. Cleaning gave me a purpose. It made me feel useful when my entire world had lost its meaning. It was the 5th day, while scrubbing the kitchen with all the strength I had left, that something changed forever. I had been cleaning since dawn, trying to keep my mind busy, to avoid thinking about Ethan and Zoe. I wondered if they missed me, if Brandon had told them I was dead, if they would ever understand the truth of what had happened. The kitchen was small but cozy, with wood cabinets Eli had installed with his own hands. I remembered coming here on weekends and him insisting on cooking for me, preparing those huge breakfasts he said would give me energy for mountain hikes. I was cleaning behind the old stove when I noticed something strange. The stove seemed to have moved slightly from its original position. There were marks on the floor showing where it had been, and now it was a few inches shifted to the right. That's weird, I thought. Eli was always so meticulous about everything. I tried to move the stove to clean better behind it, but it was too heavy for me. I looked for a broom and used it as a lever, pushing little by little until I managed to move it far enough. And then I saw it. There, embedded in this brick wall, was a small but sturdy safe. The metal gleamed as if it had been recently installed, contrasting with the aged walls of the kitchen. My heart began to pound so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Why would Eli have secretly installed a safe? What would he have kept in there that he hadn't told me about? The safe had a modern digital panel, completely out of place in that rustic kitchen. It looked like the kind that opens with a 6-digit numerical combination. I stood in front of it for several minutes, trying to process what I had found. Eli and I never kept secrets from each other. We shared everything: the bank accounts, the important documents, the business decisions. Why would he have hidden this from me? Maybe he was going to tell me and died before he could, I thought, feeling guilty for doubting him. But curiosity was stronger than anything else. I needed to know what was inside. I started by trying obvious combinations. First, I tried our wedding date, 061582, June 15th, 1982. Nothing. Then I tried his date of birth, 1-22353, December 23rd, 1953. That didn't work either. I tried Brandon's birthday, 081181, August 11th, 1981. The panel flashed red, indicating an error. I sat in an old chair in the kitchen, staring at the safe as if it were an impossible riddle. What combination would Eli have chosen? He was a man of routines, of numbers that meant something special to him. Then I remembered something he had told me many times during our marriage. "Eleanor, you are the most important thing in my life. The day you were born was the day the universe decided to bless me." With trembling hands, I dialed my date of birth, 031557, March 15th, 1957. The panel flashed green, and I heard a metallic click that echoed through the silent kitchen. The door opened slowly, revealing the safe's interior. Inside were several folded documents, a small voice recorder, and what looked like a thick manila envelope. The first thing I took out was a letter with my name written in Eli's unmistakable handwriting. My hands shook so much I almost dropped it as I unfolded it. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you, and something terrible has happened. If the moment of truth has arrived, it's because Brandon has finally shown his true colors." I sat down abruptly. Brandon showed his true colors? What did that mean? Eli had died 2 years before Brandon sued me. How could he have predicted what would happen? I continued reading with a racing heart. "For the last 5 years of my life, I discovered things about our son that broke my heart. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy the image you had of him. But now that I'm not here to protect you, you need to know the truth." The truth? Brandon had been an exemplary son, a little distant in recent years, but always respectful, always successful. "Eleanor, Brandon is not our biological son." The letters blurred in front of my eyes. I read the sentence once, twice, 3 times, but the words made no sense. "What do you mean Brandon isn't our son?" I had him. I was in the delivery room. I felt every contraction, every pain. I know this will shock you as much as it shocked me when I discovered it. Brandon is the son of Tiffany and another man. Tiffany was pregnant when she met Brandon, but he never knew. She made him believe the baby was his. My world reeled. Tiffany met Brandon 10 years ago, long after Brandon was born. How could she be his mother? But then I understood. The Brandon in the letter wasn't my Brandon. It was another Brandon, a man Tiffany had tricked years ago, making him believe he was the father of a child that wasn't his. I kept reading desperately. I discovered this by chance 5 years ago when I hired a private investigator to check Tiffany's background before our son married her. What I found chilled me to the bone. Eli had investigated Tiffany. That explained why he never fully accepted her into the family, even though he was always polite to her. Tiffany has a history of failed marriages, always involving money. Her first husband was an older, wealthy, but sick businessman. He died under suspicious circumstances 2 years after they married. He left her a considerable inheritance that she squandered in less than a year. Her second husband was Paul Jennings, a young, successful attorney very similar to our Brandon. Tiffany became pregnant immediately after marrying him, but the investigator discovered she had been having an affair with another man for months. When Paul Jennings requested a paternity test, Tiffany disappeared with the baby. My breathing quickened. Tiffany had run away with a baby who wasn't her husband's. A baby who... Eleanor, that baby is the one we now know as our grandson Ethan. Tiffany changed her last name and the child's. She moved to another city and started over. When she met our Brandon, she invented a story about being a single, widowed mother. It couldn't be true. Ethan and Zoe, my beloved grandchildren, weren't really my grandchildren. But the letter continued. Our Brandon fell head over heels for her and adopted the child as his own. He never knew that Tiffany had specifically chosen him because he had the same name and profession as the child's real father. Tears began to fall onto the paper, staining the ink. Everything began to make sense. The way Tiffany always seemed to be calculating something, how she had insisted that Brandon legally adopt the child, how she always looked at me with that strange expression. But the worst of it, my love, is what I discovered next. My hands trembled as I turned to the next page of the letter. Eli had discovered something even worse. I prepared myself mentally for the next blow, although I didn't know if my heart could handle any more revelations. Tiffany not only deceived Brandon about the child's paternity, but she has also been poisoning him against you since the moment they married. I have found evidence that she has been planning to take our fortune for years, poisoning him against me. I recalled all those small changes in Brandon that I had noticed, but had attributed to the stress of marriage and fatherhood. How he had started to question my decisions, suggest I was aging poorly, and insinuate that maybe I needed help. I found recordings of conversations between Tiffany and a friend of hers, where they planned step by step how to get Brandon to declare you mentally incompetent. Tiffany knows corrupt doctors willing to sign any diagnosis for money. The air left my lungs. Tiffany had orchestrated everything from the beginning, every doctor who testified against me, every false testimony, every fabricated piece of evidence. I also discovered that Tiffany has been subtly drugging you during family dinners for the last 2 years. Small doses of medication that cause temporary confusion and memory loss. That's why you sometimes felt disoriented after visiting them. I remembered those evenings at Brandon's house when I felt strangely dizzy after dinner. When Tiffany insisted I have a second cup of coffee for digestion, how I sometimes forgot where I had put my car keys when leaving their house, or repeated a story without realizing it. Tiffany documented every one of these episodes that she herself caused. She recorded videos of you acting confused. She took photos of you when you looked disoriented, all to build her case against you. Tears ran freely down my cheeks. My own daughter-in-law, the mother of my supposed grandchildren, had been systematically poisoning me to steal my life. Brandon knows nothing about this, Eleanor. He genuinely believes you're sick because Tiffany has shown him all this false evidence. She has manipulated him so skillfully that he is convinced he is protecting you by taking away your independence. That hurt even more. Knowing my son wasn't evil, but a victim of the same woman who had destroyed me. Brandon really believed he was doing the right thing. But there are more things you need to know, my love, things that will change everything. More? How could there be more after all this? Tiffany doesn't just plan to keep your inheritance. She also plans to get rid of Brandon once she has total control of the assets. My blood ran cold. Get rid of Brandon? What exactly did that mean? I've found evidence that Tiffany has investigated our family's medical history, specifically the heart issues that affected my father and me. She knows Brandon has a genetic predisposition to heart attacks. Eli had died of a sudden heart attack. His father, too. Brandon had inherited that predisposition, although until now he had been perfectly healthy. Tiffany has been buying medications that can induce heart problems if administered in the correct doses. I found them hidden in their house during a visit. Tiffany was planning to kill Brandon, too. The woman was a monster, worse than I ever could have imagined. Once Brandon dies, naturally of a heart attack, Tiffany will inherit everything as his widow, and the children will be completely under her control. She will have access to all our fortune with no one to question her. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. First, eliminate the inconvenient mother-in-law by declaring her incompetent. Then, get rid of the husband once he had served his purpose. Finally, keep all the money and the children as the perfect cover. Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means the first part of her plan has already worked. But I have good news for you. Good news? After everything I had just read, it seemed impossible that there could be anything good in this situation. The entire fortune Brandon believes he inherited is only properties and empty accounts that I put in his name as a decoy. The real fortune, the $28 million, is in accounts and investments that only you know about now. $28 million? I thought our fortune was $18 million. Eli had been hiding additional money. In this safe, you will find all the documents that prove Tiffany is a fraud and potential killer. You will also find the deeds to properties Brandon doesn't know exist, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and investments that generate $500,000 a month. My hands trembled as I searched the safe. Indeed, there was a thick manila envelope full of documents. Deeds to properties in different countries, bank statements that showed dizzying amounts, investment certificates in international companies. I also left recordings of Tiffany confessing her plans, photographs of the medications she bought to kill me and to kill Brandon, and a will that leaves everything, absolutely everything, in your name. I found the small voice recorder I had seen earlier. I turned it on with shaking hands and listened to Tiffany's voice speaking with someone on the phone. Yes, we're almost done with the old woman. The trial is next week. Once Brandon has control of everything, we'll start the second phase. The medications you got me will work perfectly. A heart attack during the stress of managing his mother's assets will look completely natural. The voice was unmistakably Tiffany's, cold and calculating, talking about my son's death as if she were planning a vacation. More recordings followed, Tiffany laughing as she described how she had been drugging me during family dinners. Tiffany talking to the corrupt doctor about what symptoms he should mention in his testimony. Tiffany planning how she would spend the millions once Brandon was dead. The last document you will find, my love, is a letter addressed to the FBI. I have compiled all the evidence against Tiffany for fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The letter is ready to be mailed. It just needs your signature and the date. I found the letter. It was addressed to the FBI Atlanta field office, meticulously detailing all of Tiffany's crimes with attached evidence. I have also prepared a legal strategy to reverse the judgment. I have contacts in the justice system who owe me favors. With this evidence, you will not only recover your freedom and assets, but Tiffany will go to prison for the rest of her life. My mind began to process everything slowly. Eli had not only discovered Tiffany's plans, but had prepared a complete counteroffensive. He had protected our true fortune, collected incriminating evidence, and given me all the necessary tools to destroy the woman who had destroyed my life. But there's something else, my love. Something about the children you need to know. What else could there be about Ethan and Zoe? Tiffany is not the biological mother of the twins. I stopped completely. What do you mean she's not their biological mother? I was present at the birth. I saw my grandchildren born. The twins are the children of Tiffany's younger sister, a 16-year-old girl who died in a car accident shortly after the birth. Tiffany adopted the babies and posed as their mother to gain more sympathy from Brandon and from us. I remembered when Tiffany arrived with the newborns. She had said the birth was difficult, that she had complications, which was why she looked so haggard. But now I understood that she was grieving her sister, not recovering from childbirth. The twins' real grandparents live in another city. They are humble people whom Tiffany drove away from the children with lies about them being dangerous drug addicts. They have been searching for their grandchildren for years. Did that mean there was another family who loved my grandchildren as much as I did? That Tiffany had not only robbed me, but them too? Eleanor, You have in your hands the power to save Brandon, to recover the children, and to bring justice for all the damage Tiffany has caused. But you also have the opportunity for something bigger, to reunite those children with their true family. The letter ended with lines that made me cry like I hadn't cried in years. My love, I know you feel betrayed and destroyed, but I want you to know that all of this has a reason. Tiffany chose the wrong family to deceive. She chose a strong, intelligent, and brave woman who won't give up without a fight. Now you have everything you need to win this war. Use it wisely. I love you forever, Eli. I stayed sitting in that kitchen for hours, reading and rereading every document, listening to every recording over and over again. The magnitude of Tiffany's betrayal was overwhelming, but so was Eli's meticulous preparation to protect me. My husband had been one step ahead the entire time. While Tiffany believed she was executing the perfect crime, Eli had been documenting every move, every lie, every diabolical plan. But what struck me most was realizing that Eli had died knowing all this. He had lived the last years of his life carrying the knowledge that the woman we considered our daughter-in-law was planning to destroy the entire family. "Why didn't you tell me when you were alive?" I asked his photo, which I carried in my wallet. We could have faced her together. But deep down, I knew the answer. Eli knew me better than anyone. He knew I would never have believed something so terrible about Tiffany without overwhelming evidence. I would have tried to confront her, talk to Brandon, resolve things amicably, and that would have given Tiffany the chance to change her plans, erase the evidence, and disappear with the children. Now I understood why Eli had been so insistent that we install security systems in the house, why he had started storing copies of all important documents in different places, why he had insisted that I learn to manage our finances independently. He knew that someday I would be facing this battle alone. I took the recorder and listened again to Tiffany's conversations. Her cold voice planning Brandon's death filled me with a rage I didn't know I could feel. "The old man will never suspect anything when he dies of a heart attack," Tiffany laughed. "Brandon will be so stressed managing the crazy woman's inheritance that it will be easy to induce heart problems. The doctors will say it was genetic, inevitable." In another recording, she spoke about the children. "The twins are perfect for generating pity, poor little orphans who need stability. No one will question me keeping all the money to care for them. And when they come of age, well, accidents happen." She was planning to harm Ethan and Zoe, too. The woman had no limits to her malice. But there was one recording that especially caught my attention, Tiffany talking to someone about me. "The old woman is stronger than I thought. She keeps resisting the drugs better than most. But it doesn't matter. The damage is already done. Brandon is completely convinced she has Alzheimer's." "And if she recovers after the trial?" the other voice asked. "She won't recover because she won't get the chance. Once she's admitted to the facility, a little accident will solve the problem forever." Tiffany had planned to kill me, too. Not just steal my house and take away my grandchildren, but eliminate me completely. I stood up from the chair with a determination I hadn't felt in months. Eli was right. Tiffany had chosen the wrong family to deceive. I reviewed all the financial documents Eli had left. The amount of hidden properties and investments was incredible. We had houses in 3 different countries, shares in multinational corporations, bank accounts that generated millions in interest. The mansion Brandon had inherited was worth $18 million, but it had a hidden mortgage of $20 million that Eli had secretly taken out. Technically, Brandon had inherited a $2 million debt, not a fortune. The bank accounts he thought he controlled were empty. Eli had transferred all the money to offshore accounts weeks before he died, leaving just enough to maintain appearances. The businesses Brandon was now running were empty shells. The real contracts, the important clients, the profitable investments, everything was under corporate names that only I knew about now. "Brilliant, Eli," I murmured, smiling for the first time in months. "You gave them exactly what they deserved, problems and debt." But my smile faded when I thought of Brandon. My son was being manipulated as much as I was. He truly believed he was taking care of his sick mother and managing a legitimate inheritance. He didn't know his wife was using him and planning to kill him. I picked up the cell phone I had bought the day before and dialed the first number on the list Eli had left. Reginald Reggie Stone, a lawyer specializing in financial fraud and reversing mental incompetence cases. Law Office of Mr. Stone, a secretary answered. "This is Eleanor Hayes," I said. "Eli Hayes asked me to contact him if anything happened to him." There was a silence. Then, "Mrs. Hayes, we've been waiting for your call for 2 years. Mr. Stone will receive you immediately. Can you come in today? I'll be there in 3 hours." I packed all the documents, recordings, and evidence into a suitcase. For the first time since the trial, I dressed carefully. I put on my best black suit, the one Eli said made me look powerful. I applied makeup to cover the dark circles from crying and styled my hair with the elegance I had lost during those terrible months. Looking in the mirror at the retreat, I recognized the woman who had been strong, determined, and capable of facing any challenge. Tiffany had tried to destroy that woman, but she hadn't succeeded. The journey back to the city was completely different from the trip out. This time, I was not a defeated elderly woman fleeing her humiliation. I was a warrior with powerful weapons preparing for the battle of her life. Mr. Stone's office was on the 20th floor of a modern building in the financial district. The man who greeted me was older than me, with white hair and sharp eyes that immediately reminded me of Eli. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Eli was my best friend. He told me everything before he died and asked me to help you when the time came. You knew what was going to happen." Eli explained Tiffany's plans to me 2 years ago. "We've been preparing your defense ever since. All we need is your authorization to proceed." He showed me a legal strategy that Eli and he had developed together. First, they would present evidence of fraud in the original trial, proving the medical testimonies were bought. Second, they would expose the drugs Tiffany had been administering to me, which would explain my episodes of confusion. Third, they would reveal that Brandon had inherited only debts, not riches. "But that's not all," Mr. Stone continued. "We are also going to proceed criminally against Tiffany for attempted murder, fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy." Kidnapping? The twins are not legally hers. When she adopted her sister's children, she forged documents to pose as the biological mother. The real grandparents never gave consent for the adoption. He showed me documents Eli had obtained. The real grandparents of Ethan and Zoe, Marcus and Delilah Jenkins, had been searching for their grandchildren for years. Tiffany had told them the children had died in the same accident as their daughter. "They have the legal right to custody," the lawyer explained, "and after everything they've suffered, they are willing to share custody with you if it means getting the children out of Tiffany's clutches." My heart filled with hope. Not only would I get my grandchildren back, but I would meet another family who loved them as much as I did. "When do we start?" I asked. "Right now. Eli already had everything prepared. We just need your signature on these documents." I signed paper after paper: the lawsuit to reverse the mental incompetence judgment, the criminal complaint against Tiffany, the emergency custody request for the children, the claim for all the assets that rightfully belonged to me. "Mrs. Hayes," Mr. Stone told me when I finished, "are you prepared for what's going to happen? Tiffany will fight like a wild animal when she realizes her plan has fallen apart." I thought of Eli, of his last words in the letter: "You have everything you need to win this war." "Mr. Stone," I replied with a voice I hadn't used in months, "Tiffany doesn't know who she messed with." The next day began the most satisfying operation of my life. Mr. Stone had coordinated everything like a perfect symphony. At 8 o'clock in the morning, FBI agents knocked on the door of my old house with arrest warrants for Tiffany and full search warrants for the property. I was waiting in a car half a block away, along with Marcus and Delilah Jenkins, Ethan and Zoe's real grandparents. We had talked all the previous night, crying together over the lost years, over the grandchildren they believed were dead, over the pain Tiffany had caused so many families. "Mrs. Hayes," Marcus had told me with tears in his eyes, "for 8 years we visited our grandchildren's grave every Sunday. Tiffany told us they had been burned in the accident, that there was nothing left to bury." Delilah had added in a broken voice, "We never stopped loving them. We never stopped looking for them. We knew in our hearts something wasn't right." Now, sitting in that car, we watched justice unfold. Tiffany came out of the house in a bathrobe, screaming like a lunatic as the agents read her rights. Her screams woke up the entire neighborhood. I could see the shocked faces of the neighbors who had testified against me, the same ones who had said I was a dangerous, unbalanced, elderly woman. "This is a mistake!" Tiffany shouted as they put the handcuffs on her. "I haven't done anything. The crazy one is the mother-in-law, not me." Brandon ran out after her, completely confused, trying to understand what was happening. He was wearing only pajama bottoms and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled, and the face of someone who had just woken up in a nightmare. "Agent, there's a mistake," my son yelled. "My wife hasn't committed any crime. The one who needs medical help is my mother." One of the FBI agents approached Brandon with a manila envelope. "Sir, we need you to come with us to clarify some things. Your wife is arrested for fraud, attempted murder, falsification of documents, and kidnapping." Brandon's face crumbled. "Kidnapping whom?" "The children who live in this house. It turns out they are not legally yours or your wife's." At that moment, Ethan and Zoe appeared at the door, frightened by all the noise. My grandchildren, my babies, with terrified faces, not understanding why there were police arresting the woman they believed was their mother. Marcus and Delilah ran out of the car. They didn't care that there were FBI agents, news cameras that had appeared out of nowhere, or curious neighbors recording everything with their phones. "Ethan! Zoe!" Delilah cried with tears streaming down her face. The children froze as they saw those strangers running towards them. But something magical happened when Marcus knelt in front of them and smiled with those kind eyes. Zoe tilted her head as if she were remembering something very distant. "Grandpa Marcus?" the girl whispered. "Yes, my love. I'm Grandpa Marcus, and this is Grandma Delilah. We've been looking for you for a long, long time." Ethan recognized them too. The children were only a few months old when Tiffany stole them, but the memory of true love is never completely erased. Brandon was paralyzed watching the scene. "I don't understand anything. Who are you? Why do the children know you?" Then I got out of the car. The moment Brandon saw me, it was as if he had seen a ghost. His face shifted through shock, confusion, fear, and finally something I hadn't seen in his eyes for years. Shame. "Mom," he whispered, "what is going on?" "What's going on, Brandon, is that your wife is a criminal who deceived all of us, and now she's going to pay for all the damage she caused." Tiffany was still screaming as they put her in the patrol car. "Eleanor, you old fool, this is all your fault. You ruined my perfect plan." My fault. The woman was such a psychopath that even in her arrest, she was blaming me for her crimes. The agents began taking evidence out of the house. They found the medications Tiffany had been buying to induce heart problems in Brandon. They found falsified documents about the children. They even found a vial of the drugs she had been using to make me look feeble-minded during family dinners. "Mr. Hayes," the lead FBI agent said, "we need you to come to the station for a statement. You have also been a victim of your wife's crimes." My son looked at me with eyes full of tears. "Mom, is it true? Everything we said about you in court was a lie? All of it?" "All of it, Brandon. Your wife was drugging me to make me look sick. She bought false testimonies from corrupt doctors. She planned everything for years to steal our money. But I saw the evidence. I saw you confused, losing your memory." "Because she was poisoning me. Every time I ate at your house, every time she served me coffee or dessert, she gave me drugs that made me act that way." Brandon collapsed on the front steps. The guilt, the shame, the realization of what he had done. It all hit him at once. "My God, Mom, what have I done? I took your house. I took the children away from you. I humiliated you publicly, and it was all because of that woman." The children ran toward me. "Grandma Ellie! Grandma Ellie!" they shouted, hugging me with that pure strength that only children have when they feel true love. "My babies," I cried, holding them as if I were going to lose them again. "Grandma never stopped loving you, not for a single day. Tiffany told us you were very sick, Ethan said. "That's why we couldn't see you." "She also told us you might die soon," Zoe added. "That's why we were so sad." Tiffany's cruelty knew no bounds. She had not only separated me from my grandchildren, but had psychologically tortured them by making them believe their grandma was dying. Delilah approached timidly. "Children, do you remember us? We are the parents of your real mommy, the one who is in heaven." Zoe nodded. "Mommy told us about you before the accident. She said you were the kindest grandparents in the world." Marcus took out his wallet and showed photos of Tiffany's younger sister, the twins' real mother. "This is your mommy when she was your age. See how alike you are?" The children looked at the photos with fascination. Indeed, they looked very much like their biological mother. "Tiffany never let us see them," Ethan whispered. "She said all the photos burned in the accident." Brandon approached slowly, still in shock. "Mom, can you ever forgive me? I know what I did is unforgivable, but I really believed that." "Brandon," I interrupted him, "you were also Tiffany's victim. She manipulated all of us, but the important thing now is to fix things." Mr. Stone arrived with more documents. "Mrs. Hayes, the judge has agreed to urgently review the mental incompetence case. With all the evidence we have, it will be reversed before the end of the week. And the house never legally stopped being yours. Brandon only had a power of attorney based on fraudulent medical declarations. When the fraud is proven, you will automatically recover all your assets." Brandon looked at me in surprise. "But what about the businesses I've been running? What about the bank accounts?" Mr. Stone smiled in a way that reminded me exactly of Eli when he had made a clever business move. "Mr. Hayes, I'm afraid your father was more astute than all of us. The businesses you've been running were decoys. The accounts you thought you controlled were empty. Your father protected the true family fortune long before he died." Brandon's face changed from shock to something like relief. "Dad knew what was going to happen," he murmured. "That's why he acted so strange in the last few months before he died. It wasn't because he was sick with his heart. It was because he knew what Tiffany was planning. Your father loved you, Brandon, but he also loved me, and he knew that if something happened, I would need protection." In the distance, the police car with Tiffany drove away, but I managed to hear her last screams. "This is not over. You'll all pay." I turned to my son, to my grandchildren, to Marcus and Delilah, who were also victims of that woman's malice. "Oh, yes," I murmured. "This is just beginning." The following days were like living in a movie about perfect revenge. Every one of Tiffany's lies crumbled one by one. Every diabolical plan came to light. Every person who had been deceived began to see the truth. The first devastating blow came when the FBI found the evidence Eli had mentioned in his letter at the house. Hidden behind a false panel in the master closet was a complete file with photographs, documents, and even videos that Tiffany had secretly taken of me during my drug-induced episodes of confusion. "Look at this," Special Agent Garcia told me, showing me some photos. "Your daughter-in-law meticulously documented every time you acted disoriented after drugging you. But what she didn't know is that your husband had installed hidden security cameras that recorded everything." The recordings clearly showed Tiffany putting crushed pills in my coffee, mixing powders in my food, and even applying creams to my hands that contained substances that made me tremble and appear sick. "We also found her personal diary," the agent continued. "She documented every step of her plan for 3 years. She called it the Perfect Inheritance Project." The diary was chilling. Tiffany had calculated every last detail, how long it would take to convince Brandon that I was sick, which doctors would be willing to give false testimonies for money. She had even timed how long it would take to kill me once I was institutionalized. But the most shocking discovery was that I wasn't her first victim. "Mrs. Hayes," Agent Garcia explained in his office, "we've been investigating Tiffany's past and found a pattern. She has done this before, several times." He showed me a thick file with photos of different families. Her first husband, Edward Sanders, died of a heart attack at 50 years old, 3 months after changing his will to leave everything to Tiffany. Her second husband, Paul Jennings, the twins' real father, also died suddenly from heart problems after discovering the child wasn't his. She killed them all? We are exhuming the bodies for autopsies, but based on the drugs we found in her house and the methods she planned to use on your son Brandon, we believe so. Tiffany was not just a fraudster. She was a serial killer who had perfected her method over years. Meanwhile, Brandon was living his own hell of guilt and repentance. He had resigned from his downtown law firm. He couldn't eat, he couldn't sleep. The realization of what he had done was destroying him from within. "Mom," he said, crying when I went to visit him at the hotel where he was staying, "I don't know how to ask you to forgive me for something so terrible. I humiliated you publicly. I took your house. I took the grandchildren away from you, whom you love so much." "Brandon, look at me," I said, taking his face in my hands as I did when he was a child. "Tiffany is a professional manipulator. She fooled doctors, judges, an entire court. How were you supposed to realize what she was capable of?" "But I should have trusted you more. I should have investigated before taking you to court. I should have—" "You should have married another woman," I interrupted him. "But we can't change that anymore. What we can change is the future." I told him about the real fortune Eli had protected, about the properties and investments that Brandon didn't even know existed. His face changed from shock to disbelief. "Dad had $28 million hidden? Your father was smarter than any of us imagined. He didn't just protect our money, he protected us too." But the real catharsis came when the official judge completely annulled the mental incompetence judgment. The hearing was a public spectacle. The same reporters who had covered my original humiliation now filled the courtroom to witness my vindication. The doctors who had testified against me were arrested for perjury and bribery. The neighbors who had given false testimonies were cited as prosecution witnesses against Tiffany. "This court," the judge declared with a solemn voice, "has exhaustively reviewed the case of Mrs. Eleanor Hayes and has found overwhelming evidence that she was the victim of the most elaborate and cruel fraud I have seen in 30 years of judicial career." The gavel fell, but this time it was in my favor. The verdict of mental incompetence is completely annulled. All assets are restored to Mrs. Hayes, and a complete criminal investigation is ordered against all participants in this fraud. The room erupted in applause. Brandon wept beside me, squeezing my hand as if begging for forgiveness. Ethan and Zoe, who now knew the whole truth, hugged me tightly. But the sweetest moment came when I returned to my mansion. Brandon had hired a cleaning company to erase every trace of Tiffany's presence. The decorators she had called were immediately dismissed. Every change she had made to my home was reversed. "I want the house to be exactly as you had it, Mom," Brandon told me as he supervised the work. "I want to erase every last vestige of that woman from our lives." The children were euphoric to have their real grandmother back. They ran through the house, showing me everything Tiffany had changed, everything they had missed during those terrible months. "Grandma Ellie," Zoe said, "you won't have to live in that ugly country house anymore." "No, my love, Grandma is home forever now." Marcus and Delilah had decided to move to the city to be near their grandchildren. I gave them one of the properties Eli had bought years ago, a beautiful house just 10 minutes from mine. "Mrs. Hayes," Marcus told me with tears in his eyes, "we don't know how to thank you for giving us back our grandchildren." "Marcus, those children have enough love in their hearts for 4 grandparents," I replied. "We're going to raise them together the way it should be." The first family dinner back at my house after months was magical. Brandon had brought flowers. The children had made drawings to decorate the table. Marcus had cooked his late daughter's favorite dish, and Delilah had brought photos of the twins' real mother. "Let's raise a toast," I said, lifting my glass of wine. "To Eli, who protected us even after his death, and to the true family, which always finds its way, no matter how much time passes." But in the midst of all this recovered happiness, I knew the final chapter was missing. Tiffany had been arrested, but her trial was just beginning. The media were following the case obsessively. It had become the biggest scandal of the year, the daughter-in-law who tried to murder an entire family for money. Are you going to the trial, Mom? Brandon asked me. I'm not just going, Brandon. I'm going to testify. That woman is going to hear from my own mouth what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust. The day I received the court summons to testify against Tiffany, I smiled in a way I hadn't smiled in months. It was the smile of a woman who had lost everything and got it back multiplied. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated by the wrong person. Tiffany, I murmured, looking at the summons. Now you're going to meet the real Eleanor. The children were playing in the yard. Brandon was helping with the dishes in the kitchen. Marcus and Delilah were telling stories about their daughter in the living room. My house was full of life, love, and the real family Tiffany had tried to destroy. But there was something else Eli had left in that safe that I still hadn't used, something that would make Tiffany's fall even more spectacular than she ever imagined. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to use it. The day of Tiffany's trial arrived like the dawn after the longest storm of my life. I got up early, dressed in my most elegant suit, the same one I wore when Eli and I went to the most important business meetings. Today, I was not just Eleanor, the grandmother who had recovered her family. Today, I was the woman who was going to close the most painful chapter of her life forever. Brandon accompanied me to the courthouse. Neither of us spoke much on the way. He knew this day was crucial for my complete healing, and I knew he needed to see Tiffany receive her punishment as much as I did. The courtroom was packed. The media had turned the case into a media circus. The Black Widow who fooled an entire family, the newspapers headlined. The multi-million-dollar fraud that shocked the nation, the television news reported. When Tiffany walked in handcuffed, I was shocked by her transformation. The elegant, manipulative woman I had known no longer existed. Her hair was messy, her face haggard, and her eyes held that desperate look of someone who knows their world is crumbling. But when she saw me in the gallery, something in her gaze changed. For a second, I saw a flash of that cold cruelty she had concealed for years. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the state will present compelling evidence that the defendant, Tiffany Sanders, perpetrated one of the most elaborate and cruel frauds in the history of our justice system. For the next few hours, I listened as all of Tiffany's crimes were exposed, the medications she had bought to kill me and kill Brandon, the falsified documents about the children, the purchased medical testimonies, the recordings where she planned our deaths as if it were a shopping list. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up with all the dignity Eli had taught me during 40 years of marriage. Mrs. Hayes, the prosecutor said, can you describe to the court how you felt when you discovered that the woman you considered your daughter-in-law had been systematically poisoning you? Your Honor, I replied, looking directly at Tiffany. I felt as though I had lived with a venomous snake for years without realizing it, but I also felt proud that my husband had been smarter than her. Tiffany glared at me, but I continued. This woman not only tried to steal my money and my house, she tried to steal my grandchildren, my dignity, my sanity, and finally, my life. But what hurts me the most is that she was willing to kill my son, a man who sincerely loved her, just out of greed. What would you say to the defendant if you could speak to her directly? The judge gave me permission to address Tiffany. I stood up from my seat and walked toward her. Her eyes followed me with a mixture of hatred and fear. Tiffany, I said in a clear, strong voice, you thought you had chosen the perfect family to scam. An elderly widow, a trusting son, helpless children. You thought we were easy victims. She tried to interrupt me, but the judge silenced her. But you made a fatal mistake. You underestimated the power of true love. Eli loved me so much that he protected me even after his death. Brandon loves me so much that he is destroyed by the guilt of believing you. And those children you tried to separate from me love me so much that they never stopped asking about their grandmother. Tears began to stream down Tiffany's cheeks, but they were not tears of repentance. They were tears of rage for having been discovered. And now, I continued, pulling out the last document Eli had left in the safe from my purse, I want you to hear this. I handed the paper to the prosecutor. It was a complete confession Eli had managed to secretly record from Tiffany, where she admitted to killing her previous husbands and meticulously detailed exactly how she planned to kill Brandon and me. When the recording began playing in the courtroom, Tiffany completely collapsed. Her cold, calculating voice filled the court. The idiots never suspect anything when they die of heart attacks. It's the perfect crime. And when Brandon dies, I'll have almost 30 million and 2 children who will earn me pity for the rest of my life. The room erupted in whispers of horror. Even the judge seemed shocked by the coldness of her words. "That recording is illegal," Tiffany shouted. "Eli Hayes had no right to record me without my consent." "Ma'am," the judge replied with a stern voice, "when you were on private property planning murders, you lost any expectation of privacy." Tiffany's defense attorney, who had been fighting an impossible battle from the start, finally gave up. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea to guilty on all counts." But Tiffany stood up furious. "No, I am not pleading guilty to anything. That family owes me everything I have. Brandon was a loser before he met me. The children were orphans nobody wanted, and the old woman was wasting a fortune." Her words sealed her fate. In that moment, the entire room could see Tiffany's true psychopathic nature. There was no repentance, no remorse, just rage at being caught. The judge did not need to deliberate much. "Tiffany Sanders, this court finds you guilty of aggravated fraud, attempted first-degree murder, falsification of documents, kidnapping, and criminal conspiracy. I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell with a sound that resonated like music in my ears. Tiffany was dragged out of the courtroom, screaming threats. "This is not over. You'll all pay, especially you, Eleanor." But her screams faded into the distance as I remained standing, victorious, surrounded by my true family. Brandon hugged me, crying, "Mom, I can never forgive myself for putting you in danger." "Brandon," I whispered in his ear, "you didn't put me in danger. You saved me. If you hadn't married her, if we hadn't lived through all this, we never would have discovered that Eli left us an even bigger fortune. We never would have met Marcus and Delilah, and we never would have truly learned to value what we have." The following months were about total reconstruction. Brandon returned to practicing law, but now he specialized in helping victims of family fraud. Marcus and Delilah became the grandparents the twins had lost. And I became a stronger woman than I had ever been. With the full fortune Eli had left me, I established a foundation to help elderly victims of family abuse. I called it the Elijah Hayes Foundation, so that no family would ever again be destroyed by greed. Ethan and Zoe grew up surrounded by true love, knowing the story of their biological mother, proud to have 4 grandparents who adored them, and understanding that real love has nothing to do with blood, but with the heart. One afternoon, 5 years after the trial, I was in my garden watching the grandchildren play when Brandon approached with a smile. "Mom, do you know what day it is today?" "The anniversary of something good, I hope." "It's the exact anniversary of when Tiffany was sentenced to life imprisonment." I stayed silent for a moment, thinking about everything we had lived through. "You know what, Brandon? I don't even remember anymore. That woman is no longer a part of our lives." And it was true. Tiffany had become a shadow of the past while we had built a future full of light. That night, before sleeping, I picked up the photo of Eli that I always keep on my nightstand. "Thank you, my love," I whispered. "Thank you for protecting me, for teaching me that true love transcends even death, and for reminding me that I should never underestimate my own strength. Never underestimate the silence of a humiliated woman, because one day she can rise stronger than she ever imagined. And when that happens, the entire universe conspires to bring justice." Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.